Have you ever felt that ache in your chest when someone you love pulls away? That tightness in your throat when a relationship starts to unravel, and you realize just how much you've tied your happiness to another person's actions? It's a universal human experience, this longing to hold on, to control, to make things stay exactly as we want them. But here's the painful truth. The tighter we grip, the more we suffocate the very connection we're trying to preserve. And that's where Stoicism, an ancient philosophy practiced by everyone from Roman emperors to modern-day leaders, offers a surprising solution: detachment. Not indifference, not coldness, but a profound shift in how we relate to the people we care about most. Epictetus, one of Stoicism's clearest voices, put it simply: some things are within our control, and some things are not. Think about that for a moment. How much time have you spent agonizing over someone else's choices, their feelings, their commitment, things you can't actually control? Now imagine freeing yourself from that weight. Picture a relationship where your peace isn't held hostage by another person's moods or decisions. That's the power Stoic detachment unlocks. It's not about caring less, it's about suffering less. It's about reclaiming your energy, your clarity, and your ability to love without losing yourself in the process. This video isn't just theory, it's a practical guide to transforming how you show up in your relationships. We'll explore how detachment actually deepens connection, why emotional independence makes you more magnetic, and how Stoic principles can help you navigate love, friendship, and even conflict with unshakable calm. Whether you're clinging to a fading bond, overanalyzing every text message, or just tired of feeling emotionally exhausted by the people in your life, this ancient wisdom holds the key. Because true power in relationships doesn't come from control, it comes from the courage to let go. So what exactly is Stoic detachment, and why does it feel so counterintuitive in matters of the heart? It's not about shutting down your emotions or pretending you don't care. That's a modern misunderstanding that turns detachment into a sterile performance. Real Stoic detachment is about redirecting your focus from what you can't control, someone else's actions, their approval, their presence, to what you can control, your own judgments, your responses, your values. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome at its height, wrote in his private journals, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That's the heart of it. Strength isn't in forcing a relationship to bend to your will, but in refining how you stand within it. Think of it like holding a bird in your hands. Clench your fists too tightly, and you harm what you cherish. Open your palms completely, and it may fly away. But there's a middle ground, a gentle cupping, where you offer space without suffocation, where the bird stays because it feels free, not trapped. That's the balance Stoicism teaches. When you detach from demanding a specific outcome, whether it's constant attention from a partner, a friend's unwavering support, or a family member's approval, you create room for the relationship to breathe. Now reflect on this. When has clinging to an expectation actually pushed someone away? Maybe you've anxiously dissected every delayed reply from a partner until your worry became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or perhaps you've tried to fix a loved one's problems so aggressively that they withdrew, feeling judged rather than supported. These aren't failures of love, they're misplacements of energy. Stoic detachment asks, what if you poured that same effort into mastering your own reactions instead? Not to become passive, but to become present, to listen without immediately trying to steer, to care without clinging. That's where real power grows, in the quiet space between what you feel and how you choose to act. That desperate need to hold onto someone, to make them love you the way you want, to keep them close at all costs, often comes from a quiet but powerful illusion, the belief that we can control another person's heart. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised emperors, called this out with brutal clarity. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And isn't that the truth? How much of your pain in relationships comes not from what's actually happening, but from the stories you tell yourself about what might happen. The scenarios you replay, the outcomes you demand, the unspoken contracts you expect others to fulfill without ever discussing them. Take parenting, for example. A well-intentioned mother micromanages her teenagers' every choice, what they wear, who they date, how they spend their free time, because she believes if she just controls enough, she can shield them from pain. But what happens? The child either rebels, resenting the lack of trust, or becomes dependent, unequipped to make decisions on their own. The irony, her fear of losing control creates the very distance she's trying to avoid. The same pattern shows up in romantic relationships. You text your partner constantly, needing to know where they are, who they're with, why they didn't respond right away, not because you don't care, but because you care too much in the wrong direction. You've confused love with ownership, intimacy with surveillance. Seneca's remedy for this is radical acceptance. Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. In other words, life and love will unfold as it does, whether you white-knuckle your way through it or not. The more you cling to how things should be, the less present you are for how they are. This isn't about giving up, it's about waking up. When you release the illusion that you can dictate someone else's feelings or actions, you start to see what's actually yours to nurture. Your own boundaries, your peace, your ability to love without conditions. So here's a challenge. Think of one relationship where you've conflated care with control. Maybe it's the friend you're always fixing, the partner you subtly guilt for not meeting your unspoken expectations, or the family member you judge for living differently than you would. Where are you gripping too tightly, mistaking anxiety for love? Because here's the secret Stoics knew centuries ago: real connection thrives in freedom, not in fear. The moment you stop trying to force the river, you might just find it carries you exactly where you need to go. Consider this: when someone snaps at you, or cancels plans last minute, or doesn't show up the way you hoped, what happens inside you? Your pulse quickens, your stomach twists, maybe anger flares or insecurity whispers. They don't care about me. That instant emotional turbulence, that's reactivity. And it's precisely where Stoic detachment becomes a superpower. Epictetus, born a slave and later one of history's most influential thinkers, framed it with piercing simplicity. What upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things. In other words, it's not your partner's silence that hurts, it's the story you spin about what that silence means. History gives us a masterclass in this through Cato the Younger, a Roman senator known for his unshakable composure. When his political rival Pompey betrayed him, publicly humiliating him to gain power, Cato's friends expected outrage. Instead, he simply said, "I cannot be angry with the world for acting according to its nature." No dramatics, no retaliation, just a clear-eyed recognition that Pompey's actions belong to Pompey, not to him. That's the essence of emotional resilience, the ability to witness chaos without being consumed by it. Now imagine applying that to your own life. Your coworker takes credit for your idea. Your sibling forgets your birthday. Your partner seems distant. Detachment doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't let those feelings hijack your peace. You pause, you ask, is this within my control? If the answer is no, you redirect your energy inward. Not to suppress emotion, but to choose your response. Maybe it's setting a boundary with the coworker. Maybe it's telling your sibling how you felt without accusation. Maybe it's giving your partner space while tending to your own emotional needs. Here's the paradox: by detaching from the need to control others, you gain real control over your peace, your growth, your dignity. Think of the last conflict where you reacted impulsively. What if, instead of spiraling into, "They're doing this to hurt me," you'd asked, "What part of this is mine to address and what can I release?" That shifter from reaction to response is where resilience is born, because the goal isn't to become indifferent, it's to become unshakable. There's a moment in every relationship, whether it's a breakup, a friendship fading, or a betrayal, when the pain isn't just about what happened, but about the stories we tell ourselves about what should have happened. The gap between expectation and reality feels like a wound. But what if that gap isn't the problem? What if the real suffering comes from our refusal to close it? This is where Stoicism introduces a revolutionary idea, Amor Fati, the love of fate. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly: do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens. Then you will be happy. At first glance, that might sound like resignation, but dig deeper and you'll find it's the opposite. Acceptance isn't passive surrender, it's active alignment with reality, so you stop wasting energy fighting what you can't change. Take a breakup, for example. The initial sting isn't just the loss, it's the mental reel of "if only" playing on loop. If only they'd communicated better. If only I'd tried harder. If only things could go back to how they were. But Amor Fati asks a different question. What if this breakup isn't a deviation from the path, but part of it? Not because the pain isn't real, but because resisting it only amplifies the suffering. Think of a river. You can stand in the current, fighting to push the water backward, exhausting yourself against the inevitable. Or you can turn and let it carry you, trusting that even the rapids are leading somewhere you need to go. This isn't just philosophy, it's practical psychology. Studies on emotional resilience show that people who practice acceptance recover faster from heartbreak. Why? Because they're not layering resentment or denial on top of grief. They're feeling the loss fully without adding the weight of "this shouldn't be happening." Imagine two friends drifting apart. One clings to the past, demanding the friendship stay unchanged, while the other acknowledges the shift with grace. Who carries the heavier burden? The first friend is grieving twice, once for the change, and again for their refusal to accept it. Here's the challenge. Pick one current struggle in your relationships. Maybe it's a conflict you're replaying, a change you're resisting, or an expectation you won't release. Now reframe it with Amor Fati. Instead of "why is this happening to me?" ask, "what if this is happening for me?" Not as punishment, but as preparation. Because acceptance isn't about pretending things don't hurt. It's about refusing to let the hurt define you. When you stop fighting reality, you start finding your power within it. And that's where the real transformation begins. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you no longer need anyone's praise to feel worthy. No more anxiously checking likes on your posts. No more twisting yourself into knots to please a boss or partner. No more silent panic when someone doesn't reciprocate your energy. That's the freedom Stoic detachment offers, not because you stop caring about others, but because you start trusting yourself. Seneca, in his letters to his friend Lucilius, put it bluntly: if you wish to be loved, love yourself. At first, that might sound like self-help fluff, but dig deeper. He wasn't talking about vanity or ego. He was exposing a painful truth. When you outsource your sense of worth to others, you hand them the keys to your emotional prison. Think about the last time you felt crushed by criticism or elated by a compliment. Both reactions reveal the same vulnerability. Your self-assessment fluctuates with external input. Now picture someone who's unshakably grounded in their own values. They listen to feedback, but it doesn't redefine them. They enjoy connection, but they don't starve without it. That's the difference between healthy relating and emotional dependency. One expands you, the other empties you. History gives us a striking example in Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. After losing his entire fortune in a shipwreck, he famously said, "Fortune commands me to be a philosopher with less distraction, no self-pity, no scrambling to rebuild his social status." He simply recalibrated, finding richness in ideas rather than applause. Contrast that with modern traps, the co-worker who molds their personality to fit office politics, the partner who abandons hobbies to mirror their significant other's interests, the friend who stays in toxic circles just to avoid being alone. These aren't choices, they're reflexes of validation hunger. Here's the twist: detachment doesn't make you cold, it makes you whole. When you stop seeking others to complete you, you start showing up authentically, and paradoxically, that's what draws people in. Think of the most magnetic person you know. Chances are they're not the one constantly people-pleasing or performing. They're the one who listens deeply but doesn't fawn, who cares genuinely but doesn't cling. That's the sweet spot Stoicism points to, connection without captivity. So let's get practical. Grab a pen and answer this. Where does your validation currently come from? Is it your partner's affection keeping your self-doubt at bay? Your boss's approval propping up your professional identity? Social media metrics dictating your mood? Now imagine cutting those cords, not the relationships themselves, but the weight you've hung on them. What's left? That's where the work begins, because true liberation isn't about rejecting love. It's about no longer needing it to confirm you're enough. Seneca's letters return us to the core. He who is brave is free. Brave enough to stand alone before standing together. Brave enough to validate yourself so others' opinions become interesting, not vital. That's the quiet power of detachment. It turns relationships from lifelines into choices, from needs into gifts. And when you operate from that kind of wholeness, you don't just transform your connections, you reclaim your life. One of the most persistent myths about Stoic detachment is that it means shutting off your heart, that to be undisturbed you must become indifferent. But nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics weren't advocating emotional numbness, they were teaching emotional clarity. Think of it like this: you can savor every bite of a meal without demanding the plate never empty. You can cherish a conversation without insisting it never end. That's the essence of Epictetus' banquet metaphor. Enjoy the guests at your table, but when they rise to leave, let them go without protest. The joy wasn't diminished by its impermanence. It was heightened by your ability to fully inhabit it without clinging. This distinction between detachment and apathy becomes vivid in the life of Rutilius Rufus, a Roman statesman exiled unjustly by political rivals. When his friends wept at his departure, he didn't scold them for caring or pretend he felt nothing. Instead, he said, "The sun will still shine where I'm going." No denial of loss, no performative stoicism, just a profound recognition that his worth wasn't tied to his place in Rome. He loved his home deeply, but that love didn't hinge on controlling circumstances. That's the balance: warm engagement without cold demand. Now, contrast that with how we often operate in relationships. A partner wants space, and we interpret it as rejection. A friend grows distant, and we take it as proof we're unworthy. We confuse love with possession, as if caring must mean clutching. But here's the question Stoicism invites: can you care deeply without making your peace conditional on someone else's choices? Not by shutting down, but by opening up to reality as it is, not as you insist it should be. Consider a parent watching their child leave for college. There's grief in the goodbye, but also pride. They don't love less because they release control. They love more wisely. That's engaged detachment, holding space for both joy and sorrow without letting either dictate your stability. So think of one relationship where you've struggled with this balance. Are you enjoying the banquet or secretly resenting that the guests aren't staying forever? Because true connection thrives not in rigid expectations, but in the freedom to appreciate what is while it is. Boundaries aren't walls, they're the spaces where self-respect meets reality. Think of them as detachment in action, not pushing people away, but clearly marking where you end and they begin. The Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus put it bluntly, "If you want to be respected, first respect yourself." That's the heart of it. Boundaries aren't about controlling others, they're about honoring your own worth enough to say, "This is what I will hold myself to, regardless of how you choose to act." Imagine a coworker who constantly dumps last-minute tasks on you. Without boundaries, you might seethe silently, resenting them while scrambling to meet their demands, tying your peace to their unreliability. But detachment shifts the focus. Instead of thinking, "Why are they so inconsiderate?" you ask, "What can I control here?" The answer isn't changing their behavior, it's deciding your response. Maybe it's saying, "I'm happy to help when I have advance notice, but same-day requests won't be possible moving forward." No blame, no drama, just a clear line that protects your time and energy. This applies just as powerfully in personal relationships. Consider a friend who always cancels plans last minute. You could keep swallowing disappointment, or you could detach from the need to make them reliable and simply adjust your expectations. "I love spending time with you, but I'll stop holding evenings open unless we confirm day of." Notice the tone, kind but unshakable. That's Stoic detachment in practice, caring deeply without clinging to outcomes. Now, let's get practical. Pick one area of your life where resentment's been simmering. Maybe it's a family member who oversteps, a partner who interrupts you, or a social circle that drains you. Write down a boundary script that's firm yet compassionate. For example, "I value our conversations, but I need to finish my thoughts without being cut off." "I can't lend money anymore, but I'm happy to help brainstorm solutions." "I'm taking evenings to recharge, so I won't be answering calls after 8. The magic isn't in the other person's reaction, it's in the act of declaring your worth aloud. Because every time you set a boundary, you're practicing a radical Stoic truth. You're not responsible for others' choices, only your own peace, and that's where real power begins. There's a moment in every conflict where everything feels impossibly urgent. Your pulse races, your words sharpen, and the disagreement swallows your entire field of vision. But think back to the last time you argued with someone you love. Recall how earth-shattering it felt in the moment, and then fast forward a week. Chances are the stakes that seemed life or death now feel smaller, maybe even trivial. That shift from tunnel vision to clarity is what Marcus Aurelius called the view from above, a Stoic exercise in zooming out. Imagine floating high enough to see your life not as a series of emergencies, but as a single thread in a vast tapestry. Suddenly, the coworker who snapped at you isn't a villain, they're a stressed human having a bad day. The partner who forgot your anniversary isn't rejecting you, they're juggling 100 unseen pressures. Detachment grants you this altitude, not to dismiss your feelings, but to contextualize them. History offers a striking example in the letters of Marcus Aurelius himself. As emperor during brutal wars and political betrayals, he wrote reminders like, "Soon you'll be ashes or bones, a mere name at best." That wasn't nihilism, it was liberation. By acknowledging how fleeting life is, he refused to inflame minor slights into catastrophes. Contrast that with how we often operate. We treat a snide comment like a declaration of war or a missed text like abandonment. But what if you could pause mid-argument and ask, will this matter in a month, a year? Not to suppress your emotions, but to give them breathing room. Here's the paradox: detachment doesn't distance you from reality, it brings you closer. Like stepping back from a painting to see the whole composition, it reveals patterns you couldn't spot while nose to canvas. Take parenting again. In the heat of a teenager's rebellion, every slammed door feels like failure. But zoom out, and you might see a child testing boundaries, not rejecting love. Or consider a friendship strained by distance. Up close, the silence aches. From higher ground, you recognize life seasons, sometimes connection ebbs, not because either of you failed, but because growth requires space. Now apply this to your current tensions. That colleague who undermines you, the relative who always criticizes, the lover whose mixed signals keep you guessing. How does the view from above reframe them? Maybe the colleague is insecure, the relative is projecting their own regrets, the lover is simply unsure. This isn't about excusing hurtful behavior. It's about discerning what's yours to carry and what's theirs to resolve. Because when you stop personalizing every friction, you start seeing people as they are, flawed, evolving, and just as tangled in their own stories as you are in yours. Marcus Aurelius left us a challenge. Remember how often you've mistaken the measure of things. Those words cut deep. How many wounds have you nursed that hindsight revealed as misunderstandings? How much energy have you spent resenting someone for not meeting expectations they never agreed to? Detachment isn't a cold shoulder, it's the wisdom to hold relationships lightly enough to see them clearly. So the next time emotions cloud your vision, try this. Close your eyes and imagine your life as a single dot on a timeline stretching centuries. Watch how small the drama shrinks, then ask yourself, from this height, what truly matters? The answer might just change how you love. Imagine holding a glass of water so tightly that your knuckles turn white, terrified that if you loosen your grip even slightly, it might slip away. Now ask yourself, does clutching it make the water safer, or does it just exhaust your hand? That's the paradox of attachment to outcomes in relationships. We convince ourselves that if we just want something enough, a proposal, an apology, a reunion, we can somehow will it into existence. But Seneca, the Stoic sage who advised emperors, saw the danger in this. You suffer more from imagination than from reality. He wasn't dismissing our desires, he was exposing how we torture ourselves by clinging to a single script for how things must unfold. Take job rejections, an experience almost everyone endures. You pour your heart into an application, envision yourself in the role, even mentally decorate your new office. Then the rejection email arrives, and it stings not just because of the lost opportunity, but because of the future you'd already scripted in your mind. The same dynamic plays out in relationships. You meet someone and immediately picture your wedding, or you have a fight and obsess over the exact words they should say to make things right. But here's the truth Seneca knew: suffering isn't in the event itself, it's in the gap between what you expected and what actually happened. This is why Stoicism teaches premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. It's not about pessimism, it's about liberation. Seneca wrote, "The wise man thinks of failure while succeeding." In other words, hope for reconciliation, but prepare for the possibility it may not come. Desire marriage, but confront the reality that relationships evolve in unpredictable ways. When you rehearse all possible outcomes, not just the ones you crave, you disarm disappointment of its power. Think of it like packing for a trip. You hope for sunshine, but you bring a raincoat. That doesn't mean you're inviting storms. It means you're ready to walk through them without falling apart. Now reflect on your own life. What outcome are you white-knuckling right now? Is it a partner finally committing, a friend admitting they were wrong, a family member changing their behavior? Notice how that fixation lives in your body, the tension in your shoulders when they don't text back, the pit in your stomach when things don't go as planned. That's not love, that's fear wearing love's costume. The Stoic alternative isn't to stop caring, it's to care differently, to say, I hope for this, but I am whole regardless. Consider a gardener planting a seed. They water it, shelter it, but they don't dig it up daily to check for roots. They trust the process, and if the seed doesn't grow, they mourn but don't crumble because their worth wasn't tied to that single sprout. That's the mindset Seneca points us toward, tending to relationships without demanding they bloom on command. Because here's the secret no one tells you: the less you need an outcome, the more space you create for something even better. The unexpected, the unscripted, the life that unfolds when you're not busy forcing it into shape. Conflict is inevitable, but suffering through it isn't. Think about the last time someone criticized you harshly. Maybe it was a boss questioning your competence, a partner accusing you of neglect, or a stranger leaving a cruel comment online. In that moment, your body probably reacted before your mind could catch up, heat rising to your face, muscles tensing, the urge to either lash out or retreat flooding your system. But here's what the Stoics understood 2,000 years ago that modern neuroscience now confirms. Between the trigger and your response, there's a sliver of space. And in that space lies your power. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming philosophy's sharpest voice on emotional freedom, put it bluntly: if someone speaks badly of you, that's their problem. Your problem making sure they're wrong, not by defending yourself, but by living in a way that renders their judgment irrelevant. Let's break this down with a real-world scenario. Imagine your coworker snaps in a meeting. Your report was sloppy. Did you even proofread it? The instinctive reaction, defensiveness. I was swamped. You have no idea how much I'm juggling. Or worse, retaliation, says the person who missed 3 deadlines last month. Notice what happens here. The conflict escalates because both of you are now battling for validation rather than solving the problem. Now replay the scene with Stoic detachment. You pause. You recognize their words as data, not destiny. Maybe you respond, I appreciate you pointing that out. What specific sections need tightening? No flinching, no folding, just a calm pivot to solutions. The insult doesn't bounce off because it never stuck in the first place. This isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about redirecting focus. Epictetus used a vivid metaphor. If you bathe in a public bath, expect people to splash you. In other words, entering any human interaction without expecting friction is like walking in the rain and being shocked to get wet. The person criticizing you, they're just splashing water. The question isn't how do I stop the splashing, but how do I keep my balance when it happens? Now, think of a recent conflict where you felt personally attacked. Maybe a family member blamed you for a holiday disaster, or a friend mocked your life choices. Replay it through a Stoic lens. 1. Separate the message from the delivery. Was there truth buried under their harsh tone? If yes, extract it. If no, discard it. 2. Ask, is this within my control? Their tone, no. Your growth from the feedback. Absolutely. 3. Respond, don't react. I hear you're frustrated. Let's figure out how to improve this. Detachment in conflict isn't passivity, it's precision. Like a surgeon refusing to operate with shaky hands, you refuse to engage when emotionally hijacked, because here's the secret: people throw insults hoping for a wound. When you don't bleed, they're left holding empty hands, and that's when real communication can begin. What does it mean to love someone without owning them? To cherish their presence without demanding it? Seneca's letters reveal a startling truth. The purest form of love isn't marked by intensity alone, but by the freedom woven into its fabric. Writing to his friend Lucilius, he observed, "Friendship always benefits, love sometimes injures. At first, that seems counterintuitive. How could love, this sacred bond, ever cause harm?" But Seneca wasn't condemning affection. He was exposing the shadow side of attachment. When love morphs into possession, it becomes a cage, not just for the other person, but for the one holding the key. Consider the difference between two lovers. One texts constantly, needing to know their partner's every move, interpreting silence as betrayal. The other treasures time together but respects separate passions, trusting that absence doesn't diminish connection. Which relationship thrives? History gives us a masterclass in the latter through Emperor Antoninus Pius, whose marriage to Faustina was legendary not for dramatic passion, but for quiet devotion. When Faustina traveled for months to visit family, Antoninus didn't demand her return or question her loyalty. He governed Rome, tended his gardens, and welcomed her home without interrogation. Their love wasn't measured by proximity, but by mutual respect, a bond secure enough to withstand distance without unraveling. This is where modern relationships often falter. We've confused jealousy with passion, mistaking control for care. A partner laughs with a coworker and we seethe. A friend grows close to someone new and we panic. But Seneca's wisdom cuts through the noise. He who fears loss is not fit to possess. In other words, if your love hinges on monopolizing someone's attention, you're not loving them, you're imprisoning them. Healthy detachment, by contrast, creates space for organic growth. Like two trees planted close enough to share shade but with room for separate roots, it allows relationships to deepen naturally without coercion. Think of a love that felt suffocating, perhaps your own or someone else's. Recall the weight of expectations, the unspoken rules, the tension when someone dared to stray from the script. Now imagine rewriting that story with Stoic detachment, loving without leash, disagreeing without punishment, trusting without proof. How might that shift the emotional atmosphere? Antoninus and Faustina's marriage thrived not because they never faced temptation or conflict, but because they refused to let fear dictate their bond. Here's the invitation. Reflect on one relationship where you've equated closeness with control. Maybe it's the friend you guilt for spending time with others, or the partner whose independence subtly threatens you. Now ask, if I loved this person without needing to own them, how would my actions change? Not loving less, loving more wisely. Because the paradox Seneca uncovered centuries ago still holds. The tighter your grip, the more love slips through your fingers. But open your hands and you might just find it stays. There's a reason old wounds sting long after the injury heals. We keep picking at them. Think of resentment like a splinter left lodged in your skin. You could remove it, but instead you press on it daily, marveling at how deep it still hurts. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who faced betrayals that could have fueled lifelong bitterness, offered a radical alternative. The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because an artful life requires being prepared to meet and withstand sudden and unexpected attacks. Notice what he's not saying. He doesn't advise pretending the attacks never happened. He doesn't demand forgiveness for the sake of moral superiority. Instead, he points to a practical truth. Carrying grudges is like arming your enemies with free rent in your mind. Consider the story of King Augeas of Sparta, betrayed by his closest allies and executed by those he trusted. His last words weren't curses or pleas for vengeance. They were a simple observation. You gain nothing by this but the disapproval of the gods. No rage, no bargaining, just a clear-eyed acknowledgement that his betrayers would answer to something larger than himself. That's Stoic forgiveness in action, not excusing harm, but refusing to let it define you. When you clutch past hurts like treasure, you don't punish the person who wronged you, you chain yourself to them. Every replay of the insult, every mental rehearsal of what you should have said, is another link in the shackle. Let's try something. Close your eyes and picture a grievance you've carried. Maybe it's a friend's betrayal, a parent's harsh words, a partner's broken promise. See it as a physical object in your hand. Notice its weight, its texture. Now imagine opening your fingers and letting it fall. Not because it wasn't heavy, not because the pain wasn't real, but because your arms are tired. That's the paradox. Releasing a grudge isn't about the other person deserving peace. It's about you deserving freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The memory of everything is very soon overwhelmed in time." He wasn't dismissing your pain. He was reminding you that even the sharpest edges soften when you stop turning them over in your hands. Now, here's the challenge. What past hurt still writes scripts for your present? Is it the teacher who told you you'd never succeed, the ex who made you feel replaceable, the colleague who stole credit for your work? Trace the threads. How does that old story shape your reactions today, the way you hesitate to trust, the compulsion to overprove your worth, the armor you wear just in case? Detachment from past pain isn't amnesia. It's the courage to stop letting yesterday's storms dictate today's weather. Because here's what the Stoics knew: you can't heal in the same soil where you were wounded. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting for justice, it's walking away from the battlefield altogether. Fear grips tightest when we have the most to lose. That's the cruel irony of love. The more someone matters, the more we panic at the thought of their absence, until our fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Stoics saw this trap clearly and designed tools to disarm it. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned adversity into art, offered a simple but jarring exercise. When you kiss your child, whisper to yourself, "Tomorrow you may die." At first glance, that sounds morbid. But sit with it. He wasn't promoting pessimism. He was inoculating against the paralyzing terror of loss. By mentally rehearsing impermanence, we strip it of its power to ambush us. Think of it like holding a delicate vase. If you clutch it with white-knuckled fear of dropping it, your hands tremble, making the fall more likely. But if you cradle it lightly, acknowledging its fragility without panicking, you actually protect it better. Modern psychology calls this negative visualization, but Epictetus framed it as waking up to reality. What you love is mortal. What you prize isn't your own. Not to depress you, but to free you. When you stop pretending relationships last forever, you start cherishing them properly, not with desperation, but with presence. Now apply this to today's most common fears. The texts left unanswered, the dates that never get rescheduled, the gnawing suspicion that you're more invested than they are. What if, instead of spiraling into "they're leaving me," you practiced Epictetus' vase exercise? Whisper to yourself, "This may end." Feel the ground beneath you stay solid anyway. Notice how the fear loses its fangs when you stare it down. This isn't about expecting the worst, it's about realizing you can survive it. History gives us a profound example in Anaxagoras, the Greek philosopher who, upon hearing of his son's death, simply said, "I knew I had begotten a mortal." Critics called him cold. They missed the point. His detachment wasn't a lack of love, it was love's deepest form. By accepting mortality, he honored his son's life without being destroyed by his death. Contrast that with how we often operate, demanding guarantees of permanence from relationships, as if love could be made risk-free. But here's the truth: the demand for certainty is what poisons connection. So here's your challenge today. Name one relationship fear that's been living rent-free in your mind. Is it the dread of being abandoned, the panic when someone's mood shifts, the need for constant reassurance? Now try Epictetus' vase exercise. Hold the fear in your hands like fragile glass. Whisper, "This could break." Then notice something astonishing. Your hands don't tremble anymore. You're not holding on out of fear. You're choosing to care despite it. And that's where real strength begins. Parenting might be the ultimate test of Stoic detachment, not because we care less, but because we must care so deeply while releasing control. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who emphasized education as the foundation of virtue, offered a surprising insight. Children should be taught not through force, but through play. At first glance, that sounds like indulgent modern parenting advice, but look closer. He wasn't saying let children run wild. He was highlighting the difference between rigid control and wise guidance. Think of a sapling tied to a stake. If the binding is too tight, it cuts into the growing bark. Too loose, and the young tree can't stand straight. The art lies in providing support while leaving room for natural growth. Now contrast that with helicopter parenting, the constant hovering, the micromanaged schedules, the instant interventions at every stumble. On the surface, it looks like devotion. But through a Stoic lens, it reveals a deeper anxiety, the fear that without total control, our children will fail. And here's the painful irony. Research shows that children of over-involved parents often struggle with decision-making and resilience. Why? Because they've been robbed of the very thing Musonius Rufus championed, the chance to navigate small challenges while the stakes are low. A child who never skins their knee climbing a tree might avoid pain today, but what happens when they face their first heartbreak or career setback without coping skills? This is where Stoic mentoring shines. It asks parents to shift focus from orchestrating outcomes to cultivating character. Instead of demanding straight A's, you might ask, what did you learn from that disappointing grade? Rather than scripting apologies when they hurt a friend, you guide them to reflect on empathy. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Marcus Aurelius modeled this as a father. Historical accounts describe him allowing his son Commodus to witness political debates without forcing his opinions, trusting exposure to wisdom would spark its own understanding. Of course, Commodus famously rejected his father's teachings, but that's the point. Even the wisest parent can't guarantee their child's choices. Detachment means doing your best while releasing the fantasy of total influence. So where can you start practicing this balance? Begin with small surrenders. The next time your toddler insists on wearing mismatched shoes to preschool, pause. Is this a safety issue or a pride one? When your teenager wants to redecorate their room in a style that makes you cringe, ask yourself, does this harm them or just defy my taste? These moments train the muscle of trust, the same trust Epictetus described when he said, "No thing great is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig." Parenting, like gardening, requires patience for seasons unseen. But here's the hardest truth: detachment grows most vital when the stakes are highest. Consider the college application process. You've poured years into preparing your child, helping with homework, driving to activities, believing in their potential. Now they might choose a path you wouldn't have picked. The Stoic question isn't, how do I change their mind, but how do I support their autonomy? This doesn't mean silence if you see genuine danger. Stoicism values courageous honesty. But it does mean distinguishing your fears from their journey. Musonius Rufus left us a final clue. Virtue isn't theoretical, we learn it by doing. Children won't develop resilience by hearing lectures on perseverance. They'll gain it by overcoming obstacles you didn't remove. They won't learn accountability if you're always their excuse to teachers or coaches. So tonight, as you tuck them in or wave good night to your grown child's text, ask yourself, where today did I love them enough to let go? Because the gift of detachment isn't distance, it's the space for them to become who they're meant to be. Scrolling through social media often feels like walking through a hall of mirrors. Every reflection shows someone happier, more successful, more loved than you. But here's what the Stoics understood centuries before Instagram filters. Comparison isn't just the thief of joy, it's the architect of false attachments. Seneca saw this dynamic play out in ancient Rome's gossip-filled streets, writing, "The crowd is a greater distraction than any whirlpool. You must withdraw into yourself as much as possible." Replace crowd with feed, and his warning becomes eerily modern. Every time you measure your relationships against curated highlight reels, the romantic gestures you didn't receive, the friendships that seem more passionate, the milestones you haven't hit, you're not just envying others. You're betraying your own reality, grafting imaginary standards onto real connections. Consider the last time a post triggered you. Maybe it was a friend's anniversary trip photo while your own relationship feels stagnant, or an ex moving on faster than you expected. Notice what happens in your body, that visceral punch of "why not me?" That reaction isn't accidental, it's by design. Social platforms thrive on manufactured lack, keeping you engaged by making your life feel insufficient. But Stoic detachment offers an antidote, the realization that you're comparing your raw, unedited life to someone else's greatest hits compilation. Marcus Aurelius practiced this discernment daily, reminding himself, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." Your feed isn't just content, it's the raw material your mind uses to build its sense of worth. Let's try an experiment. For the next 48 hours, conduct a digital premeditatio malorum, the Stoic exercise of anticipating challenges but applied to your online habits. Before opening any app, ask, what am I truly seeking here? Connection or just a hit of validation? When you catch yourself falling into comparison, pause and visualize the person behind the post. They woke up with morning breath, argued with their partner over chores, stressed about bills just like you. That vacation photo took 30 attempts. That glowing career update omits their sleepless nights. You're not seeing their life, you're seeing their marketing. Now here's the deeper question. How has social media reshaped your expectations of real relationships? Do you feel cheated when your partner doesn't declare love in hashtags? When friends don't publicly defend you like viral loyalty posts suggest they should? Seneca's distinction between noise and wisdom becomes vital here. You must avoid conversations with the many, for they talk only about what everyone already knows. Translate that to digital spaces. How much of your scrolling is truly enriching, and how much is just rehearsing societal scripts about how love should look? The detox challenge is simple but radical. For 1 week, mute every account that leaves you feeling lesser, not out of resentment but clarity. Notice what happens when you stop treating likes as love meters and comments as connection report cards. That space you create, that's where real relationships breathe. Because the irony is this: the more detached you become from performative displays of affection online, the more present you'll be for the quiet, messy, beautiful intimacies offline. The kind no algorithm can quantify. There's a split second between receiving a triggering text message and firing back a reply, a sliver of time where your entire relationship dynamic could shift. That moment is what the Stoics called the discipline of assent, and mastering it might be the most powerful tool you'll ever learn for emotional freedom. Epictetus described it like this: between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. At first glance that sounds simple. But in practice it's revolutionary, because right now, buried in your phone's message history, there's probably a text you wish you could take back, one sent in anger, insecurity, or haste. What if you could rewind just 5 seconds before hitting send? That's exactly what Stoic detachment trains you to do. Picture this, your partner texts, "Can't make dinner tonight, got stuck at work." Your stomach drops instantly. Mental footage plays of all the times they've cancelled plans, the jokes friends make about their absenteeism, the suspicion that maybe work isn't the real excuse. Your fingers fly. Of course you can't. Must be nice having zero priorities. Send. Now the storm begins, but Epictetus would interrupt that spiral with one question. What did you just agree to? Because every emotional reaction is essentially giving assent, signing off on the story your mind instantly created. In that text scenario, you didn't just read words, you assented to the belief that your partner is inconsiderate, that history is repeating itself, that you're being disrespected. Here's how to rewrite that moment with Stoic pause. Same text arrives, "Can't make dinner tonight, got stuck at work." Your body still reacts, that's natural. But instead of letting your fingers autopilot a response, you 1. Notice the physical reaction, the tightened chest, the quickened pulse. 2. Name the story, "I'm telling myself they're blowing me off again." 3. Withhold assent. Is this interpretation absolutely true? 4. Choose a response aligned with your values, not your emotions. That's disappointing, but I get it. Let's reschedule when you're free. The magic isn't in the specific words, it's in the space you created to decide rather than react. Ancient Stoics practiced this through mental drills, imagining insults or betrayals and rehearsing calm responses. Modern life gives us endless real-world opportunities: the passive-aggressive email from a colleague, the friend who always dominates conversations, the relative pushing your buttons at family gatherings. Each is a training ground. Try this today. For 24 hours, institute a 5-second pause before responding to any potentially charged message or comment. Watch what happens when you stop mistaking first impulses for truth, because here's what the Stoics knew: emotions are data, not dictators. They can inform you without controlling you. That text thread that used to ruin your evening, it becomes just a conversation. The coworker's backhanded compliment, merely noise. The greatest power in relationships isn't in having the last word, it's in choosing your words with intention, one pause at a time. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." At first, that might sound morbid, but there's a liberating truth beneath it. When you truly grasp how fleeting life is, the desperate need for external validation starts to crumble. Think about the last time you altered your opinion to fit in, swallowed your needs to avoid conflict, or laughed at a joke that didn't amuse you just to keep the peace. These small betrayals of self add up, quietly eroding your sense of worth until you're left wondering why your relationships feel so draining. Here's the paradox: the less you need others to fill your cup, the more they're drawn to you. It's not about arrogance or indifference, it's about the quiet magnetism of someone who knows their own value. Picture two co-workers at a networking event. One laughs too loudly at the boss's jokes, volunteers for extra projects they resent, and nervously monitors reactions after every comment. The other engages with genuine curiosity, speaks their mind without apology, and politely declines tasks that don't align with their priorities. Who commands more respect? The difference isn't charm or skill, it's the absence of hunger. People-pleasing masquerades as kindness, but it's often just fear in disguise, fear of rejection, of discomfort, of being seen as difficult. And relationships built on that foundation are like houses on sand. The moment you stop contorting yourself to please, the whole structure wobbles. Contrast that with grounded confidence. It's the parent who sets boundaries with their grown child, not to punish but to model self-respect. The friend who says, "I disagree," without needing to convince or concede. The partner who doesn't chase but chooses, knowing love isn't earned through perpetual accommodation. Now, reflect on your own life. Where have you made yourself smaller to keep someone close? Maybe it's the jokes you brush off that actually sting, the hobbies you downplay because they're not cool, or the values you compromise to avoid rocking the boat. Each time you do this, you teach people how to treat you, and more importantly, you teach yourself where your worth really lies. Marcus Aurelius offered a remedy: waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one, not when you're praised, not when it's convenient, but now, because detachment isn't about pushing people away. It's about standing firmly in yourself so others meet the real you, not a performance designed to keep them. And when you do that, something unexpected happens. The right relationships deepen, the draining ones fade, and you stop mistaking approval for love. Gratitude and impermanence might seem like opposing forces. How can we fully cherish what we know won't last? The Stoics answer with a radical practice: loving deeply while holding lightly. Seneca, in his letters, offers a startling exercise: rehearse loss in advance, not to dampen joy but to heighten it. Imagine sitting with someone you love and silently acknowledging, this moment is already passing. Far from macabre, this awareness strips away complacency, sharpening your appreciation like a lens coming into focus. Think of watching a sunset. You don't beg the sky to freeze its colors. You don't clutch at the light. You simply witness, awe-struck by the transient beauty. That's Stoic gratitude, the ability to savor relationships without demanding they crystallize into permanence. Consider a musician playing their instrument. If they grip the strings too tightly, the music chokes, but with just enough pressure, neither clinging nor indifference, the notes resonate fully. History gives us a tender example in Seneca's own life. Exiled to Corsica for 8 years, separated from his family and friends, he wrote, "Every day I rehearse my mortality." Yet his letters brim with warmth, not withdrawal. He corresponded with loved ones not as if these might be his last words, but as if they could be, infusing ordinary exchanges with extraordinary presence. Contrast that with how we often operate, postponing heartfelt conversations until the right moment, or skimming through time together while mentally drafting tomorrow's to-do list. Here's the practice tonight. As you say good night to someone, whether in person or across a screen, pause. Look at them as if storing the details, the timbre of their voice, the way their eyes crinkle when they smile. Not to trap the moment, but to honor its fleetingness. Then ask yourself, what did I take for granted today that I could have treasured? The colleague who always asks about your weekend. The neighbor who waves from their porch. The friend whose laugh still sounds exactly like it did in childhood. This isn't about preparing for loss, it's about refusing to miss the life happening right now. Because here's the secret Seneca uncovered. When you stop demanding forever, you start noticing forever in the ordinary. The shared silence over morning coffee becomes a meditation. The mundane text about grocery lists transforms into a tiny love letter. By releasing your grip on time, you finally feel its texture. So tonight, let someone you love surprise you, not with grand gestures, but by really seeing them. Not as a permanent fixture, but as a fleeting, miraculous guest in your shared existence. And watch how that shift from possession to presence changes everything. Friendships, unlike the rigid lines we often try to draw around them, are living things. They breathe, evolve, and sometimes they quietly outgrow the spaces we've built for them. Cicero, the Roman statesman whose letters reveal a deep Stoic influence, wrote to his friend Atticus about this very truth. Time dismantles all things, even friendships, unless we rebuild them anew each day. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't call faded bonds failures or betrayals. He names them what they are, natural transformations, like seasons shifting without apology. Think of the friend who once knew your every thought but now moves through life on a different rhythm. You still care, but the late-night calls have dwindled to occasional check-ins. The old jokes don't land the same way. There's no dramatic fallout, just a gentle divergence of paths. Here's where most of us stumble. We mistake change for loss. We cling to the ghost of what was, rehearsing grievances. They never make time anymore, instead of honoring what the friendship gave us when its shape fit. Years ago, I had a friend who'd been my confidant through college. We'd shared apartments, weathered crises, laughed until our sides ached. Then careers pulled us to different coasts. At first, we forced weekly calls, straining to recapture the old dynamic. But over time, the conversations grew shorter, the pauses longer. One day, I realized we weren't failing each other. We were already holding on to something that had naturally completed its course. So I stopped keeping score of who texted first. I celebrated her milestones without comparing them to mine. And when we did reunite, there was no resentment, just gratitude for the history we'd shared and permission to enjoy who we'd each become. Cicero's letters reveal this wisdom in action. When his once close friend Pompey became a political rival, he didn't vilify him or rewrite their past. He wrote, "The man is still the same, only our circumstances have altered." That's the heart of graceful detachment, recognizing that friendships don't dissolve when they change form. The childhood pal who now only connects via annual birthday posts, the co-worker who left the job and drifted away, these aren't wounds, they're testaments to the fact that some bonds exist to shelter us for a season, not a lifetime. So consider this: which friendship in your life might be asking for space rather than force? Not because either of you has done wrong, but because growth sometimes means growing apart. Maybe it's the college roommate whose values now clash with yours, or the gym buddy who's moved on to new passions. Instead of labeling it rejection, try framing it as release. Send them silent thanks for what they taught you, then loosen your grip. Because the truest friendships, even the fleeting ones, leave marks that don't fade, just as the river shapes the canyon long after the water's gone. Leadership demands a paradox: the ability to care deeply while holding outcomes lightly. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who steered Rome through wars and plagues, scribbled this truth in his private journal. The best way to avenge yourself is to not become like your wrongdoer. At first glance, it reads like advice for the oppressed, but zoom out and you'll see a masterclass in leadership detachment. When subordinates failed him or rivals undermined his authority, Aurelius refused to retaliate or micromanage. He understood that true authority isn't proven by control. It's demonstrated by the space you grant others to rise or fall on their own merits. Consider the difference between two managers. One scrutinizes every email before it's sent, rewrites team proposals to match their personal style, and interprets questions as challenges to their expertise. The other sets clear expectations, then steps back, allowing mistakes to become learning moments, encouraging diverse approaches to shared goals. Both may achieve short-term results, but only the second builds enduring capability. The Stoics called this the art of stepping aside, not abdicating responsibility, but distributing it wisely so leadership becomes less about ego and more about ecosystem. History offers a vivid test case in George Washington's presidency. Facing bitter cabinet divisions between Hamilton and Jefferson, he resisted the urge to impose his will or demand uniformity. Instead, he channeled Aurelius' principle: be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. By allowing fierce debate without interference, he harnessed the tension between opposing visions to strengthen the nation's foundations. Contrast that with modern executives who confuse leadership with dominance, the kind who mistake vulnerability for weakness and mistake consensus building for indecision. Now audit your own leadership, whether you're running a company, coaching a team, or guiding a family. Where does your involvement cross from support to suffocation? Are you editing presentations that don't need your polish, solving problems others could navigate, or interpreting deviations from your methods as personal slights? Detachment here isn't neglect, it's trust refined into strategy. Like a gardener who knows when to water and when to let roots seek moisture on their own, the wisest leaders create conditions for growth without dictating its direction. Aurelius left us a final clue in his Meditations. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding yourself in the ranks of the insane. In leadership terms, that insanity is the unsustainable delusion that everything depends on you. Release that weight and watch what flourishes in the space you've freed. We wear identities like second skins, parent, partner, high achiever, until one day we wake up and realize the labels have fused to our bones. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who prized freedom above all else, offered a peculiar exercise to his students. Remember, you are an actor in a play, and the playwright chooses your role. At first glance, that sounds like resignation, but lean closer. He wasn't saying we're powerless puppets. He was revealing the liberating truth that no single role defines us. You can play the part of CEO with excellence without believing the boardroom is your entire worth. You can cherish being a parent without dissolving into the title until there's nothing left of you outside the carpool line. Take the executive who built a Fortune 500 company from scratch. For years, his identity was welded to that corner office, the late nights, the investor calls, the adrenaline of the deal. Then came the acquisition, the abrupt retirement, and a question he hadn't heard in decades. Who are you, really? Without the business cards and quarterly reports, he felt like a stranger in his own life. That's what happens when we confuse what we do with who we are. The Stoic remedy: play your roles but never chain yourself to them. Epictetus put it bluntly: if you kiss your child, remember you are kissing a mortal. Not to darken the moment, but to brighten it by recognizing that love isn't a title you hold, but a presence you offer. Now, consider the mother who introduces herself solely as Emma's mom, long after her daughter has left for college. Or the artist who stops creating after one harsh critique because failure became their new identity. Even positive labels, the reliable one, the problem solver, can calcify into cages when we mistake them for our entire being. History gives us a masterclass in fluid identity through Seneca's letters. Exiled to Corsica, stripped of his political titles, he wrote, "I lost the Senate's esteem but gained my own." In that stark shift, he discovered a self that couldn't be revoked by any external role. Here's the practice: pick one identity you've overgrown like an old coat. Maybe it's the peacekeeper in your family, always swallowing your truth to maintain harmony, or the star employee who can't say no to another project without guilt. Now try Epictetus' actor exercise. Say aloud, "Today I play the role of blank." Feel the subtle shift, that tiny space between you and the part you're playing. That's where freedom lies, because when you stop conflating your essence with your current role, you open yourself to a startling truth. You are both more and less than any label could capture, a constellation of potential no single title could contain. There's a peculiar freedom in realizing you already have what you need, not just in possessions but in love. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised Rome's wealthiest men, wrote something revolutionary about wealth. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Flip that insight to relationships and suddenly, detachment reveals its quiet superpower. It's not about having fewer connections, but about no longer treating love like a scarce resource you must hoard or demand. Imagine sitting across from someone you care about, feeling no urge to check your phone, no itch to document the moment for social media, no silent tally of how much they're giving you versus what you're giving back. Just presence, just enough. Think of how consumerism infects our relationships. We're conditioned to believe love must be proven through grand gestures, constant contact, or escalating sacrifices, as if intimacy were a transaction needing regular deposits. A partner's "I love you" isn't savored, it's compared to the last one, weighed for intensity. A friend's support isn't received, it's measured against some unspoken ledger. This is the tyranny of more, the belief that if love isn't growing exponentially, it's dying. But the Stoics offer a radical alternative. What if love, like wealth, isn't about accumulation, but about recognizing the abundance already in your hands? History gives us a tender example in Epictetus, a Roman senator who hosted modest dinners while his peers competed with lavish feasts. When mocked for his simple table, he replied, "Hunger is the best seasoning." Apply that to emotional hunger. The friend who listens without glancing at their watch, the partner whose quiet companionship feels like home, the family member whose loyalty doesn't need performative displays. These are the relationships seasoned with enough. They nourish precisely because they aren't forced to overdeliver. Now consider your own connections. Where have you confused quantity with quality? The texts that must be answered instantly, the anniversaries that demand spectacle, the friendships that feel lacking because they don't mirror viral #squad goals posts. What if you replaced "Do they love me enough" with "Do I feel loved," not by some external standard, but by the quiet truth of your own calm when you're with them? Seneca's letters return us to the core. No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have. That's the joy of enough, the realization that love isn't something you grasp, but something you notice. So tonight, try this. Sit with someone without agenda or assessment. Let the conversation breathe. Resist the urge to curate or quantify. And when that old anxiety whispers, ask for more, prove you matter. Remember, the deepest connections aren't built on proof. They are built on presence, and presence is always enough. Detachment isn't indifference, it's the highest form of respect. Think about the last time someone truly honored your autonomy. Not just tolerating your choices, but actively celebrating your right to make them, even when they differed from their own. That's the Stoic secret Musonius Rufus uncovered. We grow best when we grant others the same soil to root themselves as we claim for ourselves. Mutual growth doesn't happen in the shadow of control. It flourishes in the sunlight of trust. Take the parent who watches their adult child move across the country for a job. Every instinct might scream to dissuade them, to list the risks, to demand they stay close. But the wiser response, "This is your life to design." That's not apathy, it's reverence for their agency. Contrast that with the partner who insists on vetting their significant other's friends, or the friend who gets offended when you explore hobbies they don't share. These aren't acts of love, they're confessions of fear disguised as concern. History gives us a striking example in the letters between Marcus Aurelius and his tutor Fronto. Even as Emperor, Aurelius wrote, "I learn more from your questions than your instructions." He didn't demand his mentor's approval, he sought his honesty. That's the paradox. When we stop needing others to mirror us, we create space for them to surprise us. Think of a vine clinging too tightly to a trellis. It may never fall, but it also never learns its own strength. Now reflect on your own relationships. Where have you mistaken possession for partnership? The family member whose life choices you critique under the guise of just wanting what's best. The friend whose new interests you subtly mock because they don't align with your shared past. Even well-intentioned guidance can become a cage when it's laced with unspoken conditions. Musonius Rufus offered a simple test. Ask not whether they please you, but whether they are becoming themselves. That shift from, are they meeting my expectations, to, am I supporting their unfolding, changes everything, because true respect isn't about molding people to fit your comfort. It's about standing witness to their becoming, even when it unsettles you. The deepest bonds aren't held together by demands, but by the quiet courage to say, you owe me nothing, not even understanding. And in that space of unforced connection, something miraculous happens. Love stops being something you grip and becomes something you breathe. Daily detachment isn't about grand gestures, it's built in the quiet moments where you choose presence over panic, curiosity over control. Start with this simple practice. Each morning, before reaching for your phone or reacting to the day's first stressor, take 5 minutes to journal 3 truths. Not goals or gratitudes, but stark reminders. I control my effort, not outcomes. People's actions reflect them, not my worth. Discomfort is data, not danger. Epictetus called these small disciplines tiny hinges that swing big doors. Progress isn't born from occasional heroics, he wrote, but from daily choosing the shovel over the spotlight. Next, try premeditatio malorum, the Stoic exercise of rehearsing adversity, but twist it slightly. Instead of imagining worst-case scenarios, visualize emotional challenges. Picture your partner forgetting an important date, your friend canceling last minute, your boss overlooking your contribution. Now script your detached response. This doesn't define me. I'll communicate clearly, then redirect my energy. Like a fire drill for the soul, this mental rehearsal wires calm into your reflexes. History remembers Cotto the Younger practicing this by wearing ridiculous clothing in public, not for attention, but to inoculate himself against the fear of others' opinions. Your modern equivalent, reply to that triggering text with deliberate pause, not impulse. Then there's mindful speech, the art of letting words pass through 3 gates before they escape your lips. Is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? But Stoicism adds a 4th gate. Does this arise from my values or my vulnerabilities? When a colleague takes credit for your idea, your wounded ego might draft a scorching email. Detachment asks you to rewrite it with precision. I noticed my contributions weren't acknowledged in the report. Let's align on credit moving forward. No flinching, no folding, just facts. Now, the 1-week challenge. Each day, pick 1 interaction to practice the pause. Day 1, before responding to any message, count to 10. Notice the stories your mind spins in that silence. Day 2, decline 1 request without apology or over-explanation. I can't commit to that is a complete sentence. Day 3, observe a conflict without personalizing. This is their reaction, not my reflection. Day 4, sit with a craving for attention, reassurance, control, and don't feed it. Watch it rise and fall like a wave. Day 5, thank someone who disappointed you, not for their actions, but for the chance to practice resilience. Day 6, consume no validation, no checking likes, fishing for compliments, or comparing connections. Day 7, write a letter you'll never send, detailing every attachment you're releasing. Then burn or delete it. The magic isn't in perfection. It's in the micro shifts, the text you didn't send, the deep breath before reacting, the moment you catch yourself craving external validation, and gently redirect. Don't explain your philosophy, Epictetus advised. Embody it. Start now, not tomorrow, not when life calms down, this second, because detachment isn't a destination, it's the next choice you make. Detachment becomes dangerous when we mistake it for emotional amputation, when we use philosophy like a scalpel to slice away parts of ourselves we'd rather not feel. Seneca saw this centuries ago, watching Romans cloak their wounds in stiff-lipped silence, and he called it what it was: grief that refuses to weep trains itself to bleed inwardly. That's the first pitfall spiritual bypassing. It shows up when someone loses a loved one and insists they're in a better place, while their body shakes with unshed tears. Or when you're betrayed by a friend and recite, "Nothing lasts forever," but your throat still tightens every time you pass their favorite coffee shop. Stoicism never asked us to cancel our humanity. It taught us to feel fully without being flooded. The second trap is performative indifference, the kind that parades as wisdom but reeks of avoidance. Think of the partner who claims they're too enlightened for jealousy, yet monitors their significant other's social media followers, or the parent who says, "I don't care what you do," while their clenched jaw betrays them. This isn't detachment, it's emotional fraud. Marcus Aurelius warned against it in his private journal. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Pretend indifference long enough, and you'll forget how to recognize your own tenderness. Then there's detachment as displacement, using philosophy to flee rather than face. A classic example, the person who buries themselves in work after a breakup, boasting about their stoic focus, when really they're just outsourcing their pain to productivity. The ancients had a term for this: otium negotiosum, busy idleness. It's the illusion of progress while standing still, like running on a ship's treadmill and pretending you're sailing. So how do we detach without disconnecting? Start by asking, am I observing my emotions or outsourcing them? When grief comes, let it land. Sit with it like Seneca advised, not as a permanent guest but as a passing storm. Name what you feel without judgment. This is sadness, this is anger, this is fear. Then ask the Stoic question, what part of this is mine to carry? The tears, absolutely. The story that you're unlovable because they left, that's optional. Here's the litmus test. True detachment feels like relief, not numbness. It's the difference between releasing a clenched fist and losing the ability to feel your hands. When you can think of someone who hurt you and feel curiosity instead of contempt. When you can recall a failure without rehearsing the shame, that's freedom. Not because you've erased the past, but because you've stopped letting it dictate your present. Seneca's letters hold the key. No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many winds blow against it. Detachment isn't about avoiding the winds, it's about learning to bend without breaking. So next time you're tempted to numb or perform, ask yourself, is this making me more resilient or just more alone? The answer will tell you everything. True power in relationships doesn't come from controlling others, it comes from mastering your own reactions. That's the quiet revolution Stoic detachment offers. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled an empire yet wrote privately about ruling himself, put it plainly: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Think about that shift. Strength isn't in demanding someone love you a certain way. It's in loving without needing their behavior to validate you. Power isn't scripting others' roles in your life. It's rewriting your own script so no one else holds the pen. Epictetus, who knew the sting of slavery before teaching emperors, gave us the ultimate litmus test. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Apply that to relationships. Can you love without needing to be seen as the perfect partner? Can you disagree without requiring the other person to admit you're right? That's detachment in action, the willingness to prioritize your peace over being perceived a certain way. Here's your challenge for the week. Practice one intentional act of detachment. Maybe it's letting a text go unanswered for an hour instead of reacting instantly, or resisting the urge to fix a friend's problem when they just need to vent. Perhaps it's noticing when you're mentally rewriting a past conversation and gently bringing yourself back to the present. These aren't grand gestures, they're tiny rebellions against the craving for control. What makes Stoic love so liberating is this: it asks you to care deeply while holding lightly. Like gathering water in your palms, clench your fists and it drains away, cup your hands gently and it remains. That's the paradox. The less you need love to look a certain way, the more space you create for it to surprise you. The less you demand permanence, the more present you become for the beauty that's here now. So as we close, return to Marcus Aurelius' midnight journaling. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Detachment isn't withdrawal, it's the art of thinking so clearly that no one else's choices can cloud your sky. Start small this week. Watch how one act of release creates ripples. And remember, the greatest freedom isn't in being loved flawlessly, but in loving fearlessly, without chains, without conditions, without the weight of expectation. That's where real power lies.